How's it going, everybody? RazingHel here, and today we're going to be playing the 5th mission in the 4th mini-campaign for Stronghold Crusader HD called Kingdom of Jerusalem.
After a little persuasion, the snake has revealed the location of the wolf's lair. It also appears that 3 members of the Depus clan are taking refuge nearby.
Travel south to the cave de Sueth and prepare yourself for a long battle. The wolf is hiding out in Tiberias, using the Depus family as his first line of defense. Exterminate the rodents one by one before removing the wolf from his seat of power. Game paused.
Okay, so here we are in game. Obviously, I'm doing the commentary in post once again. I might change this in the future if I decide to actually do the trails. I think I'll try to do that in real time, and I won't be as concerned with, keeping up a certain flow of commentary throughout the entire mission. So what we did here is I put down about 10 woodcutters huts. Could have put down more, to be honest. At the very start of the game, 10 is usually not enough to really boost the economy, but I have plenty of gold to make up for it, so it's not as big an issue. Then I also put down a couple of apple farms just to help supplement the start of the game when I don't actually have any bread production up and going. And then just going ahead and buying some wood so that way I can jumpstart the economy. Obviously, since I have the gold to do so, probably could have bought more. Then I can also put down some wheat farms and hops farms. And didn't have quite enough space there for a dairy farm, but you'll find later on after I actually delete the apple farms that I will. So managed to get all of the various farms that I needed. I've been finding out that 4 tile stockpiles usually just aren't enough, so I might expand that later on, because obviously there's more than enough space for me to build a stockpile, especially in a map like this. I can have a nice glorious sized stockpile, so I don't actually have to spend a whole bunch of time selling off goods when I could be focused on other stuff. You don't want to have a stockpile full every 5 minutes when you're trying to, siege a castle. It's very inconvenient, it's inefficient. Then I used a lot of the wood to actually build up some quarries here, supplement income with stone before I actually start taxing. I know there are a lot of people out there who will tax from the very beginning, a very min-max style, where they're actually going to be adjusting the tax rate to compensate, because by default you get that 1 additional popularity per month because you have no taxes in the game. It's just a base +1 positive popularity. So what you can do is you can turn the taxes up just a little bit, and then your popularity falls down to maybe 80 or 70, and then you turn it off again, and of course your popularity will recover because of that positive, that +1 positive popularity from not having any tax rate. But I'm not advanced enough to do that kind of min-maxing stuff, so I don't. Here what I decided to do is just put a tower up there by this mountain bluff of sorts here, because there are really only about 3 paths into my area, really, which was pretty convenient for me because it means I hardly have to do any work on the defenses at all. So I basically just walled up these couple of areas here and then built a moat in the larger one that is actually on low ground, because you can't build moats on elevated terrain. So even if the terrain is flat and if it's elevated at all, you can't build a moat on it past a certain point. So that's one very effective way that whoever designs the maps can prevent moat spam from being an issue, or just prevent the player from using moats at all. I think that was a lot more common in Stronghold Crusader Extreme. A lot of the missions, it seemed like Firefly had actually kind of clued in on the fact that the AI was generally very weak against castles with moats. They just couldn't get around them. A lot of the AIs anyway, because they just didn't have the right troops. So what they oftentimes did, it seemed like, they would stick the player up on top of a bluff, so that way you couldn't build a moat to defend yourself. Decided to use ballistas here because ballistas they're one of those units that are useful because you can just sort of set it and forget it. The ballista will be helping me whether or not I pay any attention to it or not, so tend to default towards ballistas, but mangonels have their place. I just feel like ballista is my default. my go-to tower-mounted siege engine, I guess you could say. And then, of course, you know, you get started with the economy. You got your bakers up. And what is significant that's really going on at the moment? You'll notice the game speed is still relatively low. At the beginning of the game, I generally drop it down to 20. Obviously, this is something that you're not going to be able to do in multiplayer matches, so it's really exclusive to single player, and I probably could actually improve my management skills by playing at a faster speed at the beginning of the game. And if you've watched any of the other episodes, I think I've referenced it in the past that I actually have a propensity towards playing the game on a low speed for pretty much the entirety of the match, which has resulted in some lengthy matches. Let's just say I've had times where the matches have extended on over multiple kind of afternoons because they're like you have 6 AIs to take out and you're playing the game on speed 40, let's say, the entirety of that time. It just takes a long time to build stuff up, but you know, the great thing about it is you're not under a whole lot of pressure, and for me that was the draw to the game. I liked the economy aspect to it, the building of the economy, building up the defenses. Never was a very offensive player, I guess you could say. That was never what appealed to me. The actual sieging didn't appeal to me. The defense mattered more. So I guess the perfect genre for me would be tower defense in that regard, wouldn't it? But, you know, that was my introduction to the game. And I've been trying to sort of switch it up a bit. I've been trying to be a little bit more offensive, more aggressive in how I play. We'll see how effective it is, but at the moment... And there we go. Yeah, I just got a Discord notification. I doubt that'll actually show up in the video. I just deleted the apple farms as well. But I doubt that notification will actually show up in the audio for this recording, because the great thing is it's recording from the microphone and not from my system. Right? So, got the 2 additional wheat farms up, as well as the dairy farm, which will be useful for producing leather that we're going to use to make crossbows. We're not going to need a whole lot of crossbows here, but it's nice to have some because the wolf uses swordsmen. So it's the rat is raising quite a stink at the moment. He will not shut up because there are 3 rats on this map. I haven't actually zoomed out at all. I probably should have given you a brief overview of the map. There are 3 rats to the south of me. 2 of them are one's to the south, and then 2 are to the southwest, considering, you know, if we consider the top of the map to be true north, right? And then the wolf is to the west, like the upper west. That would be northwest, I suppose, kind of northwest from my current location. So I'm in the southeast corner, right? Wait, not southeast, northeast corner. There we go. And I don't think I've actually sped the game up yet. There we go. Got the brewers going. I still despise that word. I would remove it from the language because I don't think it's easy to pronounce. But brewer, it's such a bad word. I just don't know what is my hang-up about it. But I have an issue with that word, and I wish it could be removed. I'm not going to be some sort of authoritarian, draconian person trying to remove it, but, you know, if I had my way, I don't think it deserves to be a word in the English vocabulary. It's, I wonder what the origin of it is. Like, or the origin of words can be quite interesting at times if you look them up to see where they came from, because languages are oftentimes influenced by a lot of other languages. Like, it's not just one language that, like English will derive a lot of its influence from. So got the Fletchers up and going, of course. So we're making some crossbows now. And, you know, this is the building part of everything. This is the part where you just focus on building the economy up as probably as quick as possible. I'm probably not anywhere near the quickest, but it gets the job done. And I'm not getting defeated, so should I really push myself? I had bought all these slaves, and one of the reasons that I did that was because I sort of overexpanded a little bit in the beginning. had too many population and they were just sitting around the campfire. I wasn't recruiting them. They weren't actually being used in any of my industry buildings. So I went ahead and I actually just recruited a whole bunch of slaves because the slave unit is very cheap. It's an easy way to get rid of the excess population so that way you don't actually suffer that debuff from deleting a hovel and then you have too little housing, I guess you could say. And then I don't expend unnecessary amounts of food to keep that population going. It can be an issue in the beginning of the game where if you don't know how to expand correctly, like if you don't have a feel for it, you can actually run out of bread relatively easily. I think I bought actually 10 apples in this one anyway because I expanded a little bit too quickly and I didn't hire enough of the slaves fast enough. But here now, after the 4 Fletcher's workshops were put up, I'm going to be expanding the armory one more time, and we run into one of those classic problems with the Stronghold games that came before Stronghold 2, so basically Stronghold HD and Stronghold Crusader, is that you couldn't actually place buildings down on top of peasants. And so I wanted to expand my armories there, and there were a whole bunch of peasants that continued to walk by, so I had to patiently wait for them to move out of the way, or for enough of them to be out of the way for me to actually build it. So when you hear people complain about the newer Strongholds, I know it's a bit of a common trope among Stronghold players. If you've ever monitored, let's say, discussion boards around Stronghold, there is a lot of... There's a fairly vocal amount of people who actually are interested in another two-dimensional Stronghold game, right? So they'd like to see more classical gameplay like this. Get rid of the 3D engine, they say. And that's fine, because I think there could be some pretty significant improvements made even in a 2D format, but one of the issues I have with the two-dimensional games is there is just a lack of quality of life features, and one of those things I would say, obviously, is the ability in the three-dimensional games to actually place buildings down on top of peasants, and then it just simply moves the peasant out of the way. Or another one is the ability to buy or to build an auto market that will automatically buy and sell goods for you. Obviously, you put this behind a little bit of a economic paywall. You want to make sure that the player is already well established, is not actually struggling to make their economy run, so that way you don't have any sort of min-maxing going on in the earlier parts of the game. But then once you get to the later parts of the game, where you're obviously going to be focusing a lot more on the combat itself, it's nice to just be able to park the economy running in the background, not have to think about it too much. I actually started losing some popularity right there because I don't have the exact percentages nailed down, or the exact population numbers nailed down for how many inns I need to maintain like 100% coverage. So in other words, I expand a little bit too fast and then I don't have quite enough coverage. These are the kinds of numbers that don't mean a whole lot to me. It's part of the min-maxing mindset probably, but for me it's like I just plop down inns. If my popularity takes a hit after increasing my population, I'll just plop down another inn. It's not the most efficient, but I'm not playing competitively, so who really cares? And so what the objective here is now, obviously, is I'm working on building swordsmen. And swordsmen are my pretty much go-to unit. I've mentioned before, I believe in quality over quantity. I would rather click fewer times, but produce better units. I really don't see a whole lot of merit in producing a lot of units, because it really does get taxing after a while, because you have to spam click so many times to build an army. And then you also run into army limitations as well, since there seems to be more of a unit limitation rather than a power limitation, which I've never really understood. That must be one of those limits on the game engine itself. I doubt it's a limit anymore. And I remember they increased the army size limit to 10,000 with Stronghold Crusader Extreme, but I'm not exactly sure that was carried over into the original Stronghold. I think it was, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But you know, you run into issues. I have run into issues where your army size is too large, and it doesn't seem like the game actually makes any sort of delineation between an army of 500 spearmen and an army of 500 swordsmen. So, you know, in those situations, then you pretty much always have to favor the better unit. And, yeah, there would be a way to address that, is simply look at the power rating of a unit. So in other words, a swordsman would have a much better power rating unit than a spearman, which means that you would ultimately be allowed to build fewer of them before you hit your maximum army size. And maybe that is what they do. It's just I don't see that happening. Like I've hit the maximum army size many times, and it always seemed to be based solely on the number of units that I had. But I could be completely wrong there. That's just my anecdotal testimony, I guess you could say. So the rat could have probably been taken out earlier than now. So we're already 15 minutes into the economy, or into the match, building up the economy and everything. And the rat is fairly easy to take out. Like, he's nothing like the snake, where the snake will just mass recruit archers, and that they can actually deal some damage. The snake is surprisingly human-like in the way that they spam archers and stuff. Like, they'll actually fill up their towers, and they'll fill up the keep and make sure that any incoming force is going to be bombarded with archers. So think about that. You know, if they went ahead, if the wolf, for example, went ahead and filled all of his towers and all in his keep, the entirety of it, with crossbowmen, I'd probably have a much harder time at defeating the AIs. But in regards to doing the trails, I think before I move over to the trails, I would like to complete at least Stronghold Legends. So Stronghold Legends has been kind of put on the back burner. I think I have about 4 missions left in it, and I was getting to the point where I couldn't complete the missions as fast as I wanted to. It was looking like an hour and a half to 2 hours sometimes to complete a single mission, and I wanted to complete them faster than that. And it's a combination of me not being good enough, and the actual maps have changed from the past. They've been rebalanced and made more difficult. For the Evil campaign, I believe it is, yeah, because I completed the first 2 campaigns, or I recorded myself completing the first 2 campaigns, but I just didn't want the missions to drag on for so long. Like, I like the hour-long format, the 30-minute format. I think both of those are good. And then anything that falls under that is, whatever, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, those are all fine. But I don't like it when it starts pushing 2.5, 3 hours. It's just, I feel like that's just too long to expect anybody to pay any attention to it. Could be completely off about that. And so what I was doing is I was working on that mission a couple of times, and it just got set on the back burner. That's another issue I have, is like I don't have enough recording space to record 3 hours straight on my solid state drive. Oh, look, yeah, okay, so we're doing an actual siege of the stoat, the rat the stoat. And I'm going to be using a siege tower, because siege towers are fun. You just, they're fun in a lazy way, because you can just run it up to the gatehouse and then not worry about getting onto the castle after that. The really fun attacks are the ones with catapults, where you can just bring an entire castle down and get like 30, 40, 50 catapults and absolutely pummel it to the ground. That's always very epic, and that's probably the most fun, but it takes a lot more effort, let's say. Getting back, okay, we finished off the rat the stoat. So getting back to Stronghold Legends, I was actually just looking for a way to complete the mission faster, more quickly, so that way people don't have to struggle through 3 hours worth of me dilly-dallying around, kind of. I do procrastinate in my attacks a little bit. I like to make doubly sure that I'm going to actually win the attack before I launch it, so that leads to some situations where the matches are artificially prolonged. They run longer than they actually need to be. And here's a good example of me not understanding the economy well enough. I ran out of food. My granaries are empty. And that's something that somebody more knowledgeable than I would not have a problem with, because they would understand how many bakeries you would actually need to feed a population of how many people. On average, obviously. At a certain ration rate. So in other words, like extra rations, double rations, whatever. And I haven't nailed that number down yet. Although I could start paying more attention to it, and I'm sure I could get it. It's not like it's beyond my ability. It's just, it's one of those things that doesn't really show up on my radar, because it's not something I care a whole lot about. Like, in general, I would say the very minute kind of details of things has never really interested me a whole lot. Like, when you get down to raw numbers, it's just not fun. really, to look at that. I know some people have a lot of fun, actually, you know, the min-max style, that they get a kick out of doing that. But for me, it's the fun comes in just being able to play the game. And stuff like that kind of distracts from my enjoyment of it. So I probably could do it. It's just I wouldn't have as much fun doing it as sort of just blundering my way through it, I guess you could say. So, once again, thinking about Stronghold Legends, completing the Evil campaign after I finish this mission, because this mission is the last in the official campaigns for Stronghold Crusader HD, even though it's actually one of those campaigns that it's very similar to the skirmish trail, right? Because you're playing against you're not playing against scripted events as much. You're playing against the actual AI much as you would in the skirmish trail. But after we're done with this is the final mission. Wow, I've been actually playing Stronghold Crusader for quite some time already. Since the start of the year, I believe, because I kind of finished Stronghold HD back in December of 2016. Maybe January of 2017. And then I moved over to Stronghold Crusader HD. So I've been almost half of a year already. It has been half a year. It's been over half a year. I've been working on finishing the campaigns for Stronghold Crusader HD. And we're getting there. This is the last one. And yeah, I'd like to finish Stronghold Legends. Stronghold Legends, I enjoy it more than I think a lot of people do. It was just, I had that issue where I was feeling like the missions were running too long for me to be content with it. Using a very similar approach here to getting the siege tower onto the gatehouse. One concern, of course, is that the siege tower can be destroyed by the defending force. So you have to make sure that your troops are relatively close before you actually run it up to the wall. And since the siege towers are quite a bit faster than the swordsmen themselves, it can be an issue. One of the fun things about the older Stronghold titles, though, is that you would actually see how much gold and how much popularity the AI lords had. That's something that you weren't seeing a whole lot in Stronghold Crusader 2. Stronghold Crusader 2, I was very kind of disappointed in how much the AI cheated. Like you can complain about the AI being a weak attacker, an ineffective attacker in Stronghold Crusader HD. I'm not exactly sure that letting them just cheat is better. So, for example, I remember one mission, I was using catapults. I like the AI was completely encircled and being bombarded on all sides. I was just tearing his castle right down with catapults, and he would just like immediately rebuild everything. It was really kind of frustrating to fight against, because you think I should be able to win through economic attrition, right? I should be able to lay siege to a castle, and they shouldn't just be able to continue to plod along as if nothing had happened, even though I've cut off their access to all of these resources. They can no longer make food. They can no longer, get value from stone or iron. All of these things. And in Stronghold Crusader 2, which is the 2014 game, that simply was not the case anymore. You could completely cut the AI off from all of their economic activities, and they would still be able to recruit tons of units. They would still be able to rebuild their castle almost instantly. And it made for a rather frustrating experience, for me anyway, because that's not how a lot of castles were taken, especially. I know some people get upset about the whole realism thing, but that is one of those immersion things that I have a much harder time dealing with, this idea that sieging a castle and cutting off its trade routes and stuff has no impact, like virtually no impact whatsoever on the strength of the AI lord. It's nonsense in my opinion. It needs, and something needs to be done about it. Like, make the AI throw more troops at an attack or something, but having them cheat so blatantly for the defense bugged me, I guess you could say. But I put a lot of hours into that game. I think I put 80 or 90 hours into it during the beta too. That was sadly I didn't play it much after it was actually released, but that gets into other issues, as I think I've mentioned before, where I I had a certain situation that made it very difficult for me to play it anymore. Like all I had was this really old laptop, and it really didn't work on the laptop. It was I even had a hard time of it on the desktop. This was before I actually built my current computer. So this was a very, very kind of old, I think it was a 2011 kind of computer. No, it was actually older. It was 2010. I think it was 2010. So, you know, it had a very average graphics card in it that was about 3 to 4 years old at that point. So as you can imagine, it wasn't playing Stronghold Crusader 2 very well. Like, I was limited to 30 frames a second, and frequently, if I had multiple AI lords on the map, it would drop down into the single digits during an attack and stuff like that. So it really was kind of unusable. So that kind of plays a part into why I wouldn't play the game. I wasn't able really to play the game, I guess you could say. But yeah, now we're here getting back to the gameplay itself. I should say I have this tendency to say we, because I think it feels a little bit more inclusive, as if you have an impact on the actual game. Maybe it's a little bit disingenuous, but okay. Yeah, but I removed all 3 of the rats now, and we have just the wolf to focus on now. So a little bit over halfway done. The match lasted about 40 minutes, and we're currently 26 minutes in. And now we just have the wolf to focus on. And I guess you could say it's a bit shameful I wasn't able to take the wolf out more quickly, because, well, one of the things, there was only one way to approach the wolf's castle. Much like my castle here, there's only one little way in. I think his is actually a little bit more secure than mine. My castle setup here, this area has 3 paths in. For the wolf, there's just 1 path in. So obviously he has some nice mangonels up there and everything. And me being the type of conservative person in attacking who wants to make doubly sure that any attack I launch actually wins, I have a tendency to overbuild. So have more troops than it's absolutely needed. And I was also running into an issue with recruiting. I like to have a lot of peasants to save up, like 20 or more, and I only had about 11. So as you might imagine, recruiting was going a little bit slower than I'd prefer. Right now, at the moment, though, I have 20, but like before this, I think I only had 11 or 12 available at the time. And when you're running the game at speed 90, you get those peasants back relatively quickly. You don't have to wait a whole lot of time before you're ready to recruit another batch of 11. Yeah. I guess that's pretty much it. Decided to actually expand the stockpile here. This was sort of me coming to the realization that 4 stockpile plots just isn't sufficient. And I'm thinking about altering my design for the future based on this. So at least 6, I think. Maybe we'll go for 8. I think I'll try 6 first. Like, I don't want to overdo it, but 6 or 8, depending upon the map. Some maps are really cramped, and then it's really not as practical. But I still, for some reason, my avatar still is not showing up in this game. So I've set my avatar multiple times. Oh, I know why. It's because this is the campaign, isn't it? Like, you'll notice when I mouse over my stuff, I hover over my stuff, it'll display my coat of arms, except my coat of arms isn't there. And I've tried changing it multiple times, and like every time I would check it out to see if it was actually showing up, it was showing up. But then when I actually go to record an episode, it turns out it's not there. And I think it has to do with more with the campaign, because it's a campaign skirmish map. You're not allowed to import your avatar, or however you want to phrase it. And I'm pretty sure in like the actual skirmish part of the game, like the skirmish trail, that's not going to be an issue. Had a bit of a difficulty there with pikemen. Pikemen are killing all of my crossbowmen, because the AI can be a real pain in that way. The snipers of the world, they'll position just a few bowmen just out of range of all of your other units and just slowly snipe away. So that's why I'm a big fan of the fire ballista. If you haven't noticed by now, I do like my fire ballistas. Rather than having, for example, crossbowmen or archers or horse archers. Yeah, I just prefer the siege equivalent of a ranged unit, I guess, in a lot of situations. A lot of AI situations, anyway. And then we're working on a whole lot of catapults. So the catapult spam is one of those things. If you don't do it right, it seems to go really badly. And in this mission, you'll find out I didn't do it right. I broke them up way too much. I got them way too close because I don't have this. I don't have quite the sense that I think I once did for the range of a catapult. In later games, no, I think even then they didn't. Catapults don't have a range indicator, which, in my opinion, is something that needs to be addressed. I think that you should be able to see what kind of range a catapult has. I think that's the kind of information that would be useful. It's not necessarily exploitative. It just makes it easier for players to get into the game because they understand the range of various units. Like, it could be an option, I suppose, to turn off, but it's just something that I would like to see personally. So you don't know exactly what the range of a catapult is. You get a feel for it as you play the game more, obviously. But I haven't played the game a whole lot. And, you think about it, really the only time I've ever been playing Stronghold Crusader HD in the past 6 months was when I did these episodes. So you think about that, it's about one episode a week. In general, up until this point, I really had no difficulty in completing any of the missions. They're relatively niche, I guess you could say. There were very specific circumstances that you were allowed to operate under. And then that means, of course, that you don't do a lot of the stuff you'd commonly do during a standard skirmish match, right? So I haven't had a whole lot of practice in the past 6 months, to be honest. And then you just sort of lose your knack for how, what kind of range a catapult has. And so when I actually performed this attack here, the issue that I ran into is I just got my catapults way too close to the castle, so they got absolutely massacred. They just wiped out in hardly any time, which was quite unfortunate. I was actually a little bit worried that I would have to reload, because in general I like to save before I actually launch an attack, just in case it fails. I try to plan to make sure it doesn't fail, but if it does fail, I'm not going to act. I don't want to have to play the entire beginning of the mission all over again, especially when it comes to against the AI. We would get to a very similar position as that I was in before. It's just trying out different tactics, and I'm not exactly sure how much of that is like frowned upon at all. It might not be frowned upon at all, but some people save scumming, I guess, is an issue. So I tried to avoid reloading. I tried to do it in one take. I like the idea of doing it in one take. It also saves a fair amount of time, right? Aside from the amount of time that you overbuild, but yep, not exactly sure. I mean, this is the part of the episode where I start running out of things to talk about. Reference this some other times, but I seem to be good for about 30 minutes, and then I just there's not a whole lot else I can say. I mean, you see what's going on here, don't you? I suppose if you're just listening to it, I could describe in detail. I'll do ASMR Stronghold Crusader HD playthroughs. How about that? I could describe every element of it. We are now moving our swordsmen to the... I can't even get my directions correct, can I? Like, I'm moving my swordsmen to the southwest corner of the map. I still don't understand the people who enjoy that kind of stuff, because it's one of those things I don't, but... It's very curious. The sort of niche communities that have popped up only really because the internet can support them, or because the internet brings people together on a sort of a worldwide basis instead of a citywide basis or a statewide or a countrywide basis. Just getting into rambling kind of things. That reminded me, there was a article that I recently read. It was regarding chatbots, and apparently some fairly well-off person wrote a chatbot for his father before he actually passed away from cancer. And there was one of those situations where the technology, it sounds impressive, but I never understood who actually wants to use these chatbots, because it seems like such an inefficient way of distributing information, because that's ultimately the objective, right? You want to present information to somebody. So in other words, like this chat bot that was of his father was supposed to present information from his father's lifetime. And, you know, personally, how I would have just presented that information is had either an interview style where somebody sort of sits down and then asks the interviewee about their life experiences or whatever, or just have them perform a monologue, much like what I do here is I just sit down and I ramble. I can at times pretend that I'm actually addressing certain concerns that somebody might have if it was an actual conversation, but like either of those two formats, in my opinion, in my preference, I would say would be always be, well, preferred to the chat bot thing. Like Facebook has experimented with the idea of chat bots, and I just don't see the benefit because there is so much time lost in the idle chit-chat stuff that is simply not needed when you're, you know, getting information from a computer system, right? Or it's just a very inefficient way of presenting information. It would be like if you had a conference and instead of the person actually getting up on stage and delivering his monologue or what have you, they would actually engage like one audience member or something. It'd be really weird. I understand it probably can be a little bit more interpersonal, but it just seems like a weird application of the technology. So here we get, getting back to the actual assault. That's what's going on here. I chose about 20 catapults to begin the initial assault. Should have thrown them all into the fray, to be honest. And then I moved them way too close. Like I did not need to be nearly this close with them. I probably could back up about, you know, double that. Well, not double. How do I describe the distance? But anyway, these catapults are getting absolutely massacred. And like 20 was simply not enough to begin the assault. I think it was 17 or 20 or something like that. So now I finally bring the last 15 in, and it's like at this point already I've sort of lost the momentum, like the overwhelming force. So it's just not helping much. But I did manage to take that initial tower with the mangonel down. And since this isn't the only force of swordsmen that I have coming in, we can more than easily get the rest of the swordsmen going over there. So I have quite a few swordsmen here. It's like over 200, 250 maybe. So the first force is obviously planned on getting wiped out. The idea with the first force was for me to trip all the traps, to take a lot of collateral damage from the units and the towers and whatnot, and to divert the mangonels from more important troops. The idea that I was hoping for was that the mangonels would focus on the troops that were closest to the castle and not actually target my catapults. I don't think that was actually what happened, but it was what I was striving for. So those troops up there, those swordsmen up there, were intended to die. I also I failed to mention the boiling oil, pitch ditches, etc. The idea is that those are part of the traps, the trap defenses, and that they're going to be removing those. But as you can see, my catapults were way too close, and they got exclusively targeted by pretty much every ranged unit that the wolf had at his disposal. So lost the entire, well, not like, there are like 3 left, but I mean at that point it's pretty insignificant. That's the kind of attack that the AI would launch against it. How about that? How about if the AI actually launched a significant attack? So they throw 20 catapults at you. They could really do some damage if they were just a little bit more willing to throw a sizable amount of siege equipment at the attack. That's oftentimes the problem, is they just don't have enough siege equipment. But I have made a breach here. I'm a little bit surprised in this design of the wolf that he doesn't have any boiling oil in the keep itself. He doesn't have any engineers up there holding the boiling oil, because that's a very effective way to just clear out that entire area in front of your campfire. You can burn a lot of troops just by dumping some boiling oil right in front of it when the enemy approaches. But it's looking like pretty much the end of the wolf. Yeah, very close to being taken out, because I do have quite a few swordsmen left. Even though I'm taking damage from all sides, I did have the overwhelming odds in my favor here, which I like to do. Although I did build a siege tower because I was a little bit worried that I wouldn't be able to get in there without getting on the walls. I thought he might wall it up before I could actually get through there. So that is the 5th episode for the 4th and final mini campaign for Stronghold Crusader HD. Thank you very much for watching as always, and I hope to see you next time.
victory!
With the rodents dead and the wolf gone for good, order is at last restored to the region. For the time being, at least.